Hey everyone, and welcome to Dev Chat here at Myrkur Games. We wanted to give you guys a bit more of a deep dive now that the trailer's out, and we've got more coming, but until then, well, I just wanted to gather you guys here and ask you a few questions.
My name is Dali Einers. I'm one of the writers, and I'm the cinematographer and performance director.
My name is Halldór. I am the CEO and game director of Echoes.
And I'm Magnus, and I'm a senior writer here, but for today, I'm just the interviewer. So let's start from the top. I think that's where it has to begin, right? How would you describe Echoes of the End to someone who's never heard of it?
I would say that Echoes of the End is a story-driven action-adventure game which is highly inspired by our local country here, Iceland. In terms of the gameplay, it's going to be an action-adventure game that has combat, that has platforming, that has puzzle solving, and that has a little bit of exploration as well, certainly in some levels. And it is a third-person game where you play as this main character called Rin, and you are accompanied primarily with your main companion of the game, Abram, both of those characters we saw in the trailer. So if you haven't seen the trailer, go watch the trailer and you'll get a lot more context for what we're about to talk about.
I kind of want to dive into, in one of the recent YouTube videos we uploaded, we started by saying nearly 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a project that's been going on for a long time. Would you have described the game the same when you started?
Close. I would also say 10 years, I would always when I get asked this question, I go well, it depends where you put the measuring stick. The idea for the game is born in 2017. That's when we're coming out of university and we're deciding to do something and see is maybe possible with the technological advancements that are happening at the time. We saw the release of other games like Hellblade, which certainly kind of opened this window for belief that people could do this as well. And that led us on to, okay, what could we do? If we were to make the game that we really, really, really want to make, would that be possible? I would say that the biggest difference between now and then in terms of what the different description is of course now it's a fully realized vision, so we have all the details. But primarily, I don't think we realized how ambitious we could go at the time. We were like, maybe we could do something like this, but it kind of kept panning out and kept panning out and kept panning out, and everything was kind of evolving and advancing in the right way. We're talking about how motion capture evolved, how photogrammetry evolved, how technology evolved, how Unreal Engine evolved. All the vectors were aligned.
When you're starting out on a project like this, you have a sentence like Dodit said, it's a fantasy action adventure, sword, magic, you add, these are the qualifiers you have there. And then everyone creates a different image in their head.
I know. Yeah.
And that is not close to anything anyone's saying. And that's also why it's difficult to answer the question.
Yeah.
Is because he says this line, and we all know what he's talking about, but then the audience might not. So when you're making the game, you have the same problem with everybody who's making it. And it takes you ages to find your way through the fog until you realize, okay, when we say action adventure, we're not talking about James Bond.
Yeah.
And you go a little bit further in, and we're not talking about, and you know.
All right, with that in mind, the thing that sets us apart from other games, or how to understand the game, is that it is story is the heart of the game. That's what drives it. Yeah. And so it's a very story-centric game. But there's a lot of gameplay as well. So you have fantasy melee combat with swords and magic against monsters and humans, alongside your companion throughout that, and epic bosses as well. Pretty bombastic platforming with abilities and different levels that go pretty wild as well. And then you have puzzles that are pushing what we call the revolving wheel of mechanics, or rotating wheel of mechanics, which is that every chapter has distinct mechanics in our game. So we go pretty hard on the different types of puzzles and different types of mechanics. So it's a mechanically dense story game.
Yeah, and the story and the mechanics sort of hold hands throughout
Yeah.
this. So we talk about these chapters in terms of there are 10 chapters throughout the game that you go through, and they all have their own sets of mechanics and their own environment, which are vastly different than if you watch the trailer. You would have seen it starts with a volcano and then with an ice glacier, and that's sort of what it's like playing the game. You get these huge differences in where you are, and those areas inform the mechanics. And then there's the story, which is also to a certain degree broken up into these episodes, these chapters of arriving in a place, realizing there are these problems or whatever's going on, you have your goal, and then you get to complete a whole adventure in one chapter. And it's ideally.
A chapter's like an episode, right?
Yeah, and it's satisfying in and of itself.
Yeah.
Now on that note, when we've mentioned the sort of chapter design before, we have gotten the question of whether these are episodic releases.
Yeah, we're not. It's one game, 15 hours or so, complete experience, but it has chapters. Kind of like Uncharted will have chapters for those who have played that game. But specifically, we changed the environments. Like Uncharted does that too in a way. They change the environments for different chapters, but we also change all the mechanics, or not all of them, but many of the mechanics.
Well, I want to jump back a little bit again because you talk about it depends on where you draw the yardstick, where you start measuring from.
Yeah.
Is there a moment you can pinpoint there was now a specific goalpost that was being moved towards?
Yeah, I think the turning point for sure is the point where we signed with the publisher. I think that's a fair thing to say because before that point, we have been creating technology and prototyping and trying to put together like 20, 30 minutes of a game that made sense. And really soon after that, that's when we signed with the publisher and we had kind of laid out broad plans for the rest of the game. But then we had to really crystallize them and figure things out and start moving into pre-production and then actual production of the title. So I would say that's like the flip.
Yeah, I was almost going to say like 12 months ago.
Where have you been? Where have you been for the last 4 years?
Because it's wild, because you spend so much time with everybody in their own corners a little bit when you're making this kind of stuff. So from my perspective as somebody who's got like a specific zone that they're working in, you often don't see what other people are doing, and they're often laying the groundwork on something very fundamental, and then everyone's laying groundwork, and it's your job to go between and talk to everybody. And then just as we're sort of working on the alpha or something, it comes to a point where now we're constantly talking with everyone.
Yeah.
And it becomes this kind of whirlwind soup of everything is happening at the same time, everyone's firing on all cylinders. And that's, to me, when I first understood really what the game is about. Obviously, I had different understandings throughout, and I feel like we were always getting closer and closer and closer to it. But around alpha is when I was like, okay, this is exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it crystallized for a lot of people at alpha, because alpha, for context, is when we put the game from start to finish playable for the first time. Pretty much like a month before that, we made it happen, then we took the month to make it work. Like you're saying, like especially when you're making a new IP and a new fantasy world, then there's a lot of new things. But when you put a new team together and say like, oh, we're gonna make a whole new fantasy adventure and it's gonna be everything new, the start tends to be like, okay, but what's the world? How does this work? Like, what's anything? So I think that
what do things look like, and
and everybody's kind of working together, just trusting that other people are working towards the same goal, and at some point it will crystallize and harmonize.
Yeah, totally. So we during that time as well, when everyone's sort of laying the groundwork, we're often just making a thing and then posting it on our Discord, just so that people see, this is what I'm doing right now.
This is now canon.
This is now, and everybody's sort of adding bits, and we're like, okay, eventually we're gonna have to take all these things and put them together.
I remember the first time I heard music.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
That was a big moment.
I think there are loads of things like this in game design too, because there's so many disciplines within the field that when you see one suddenly get added on top, you're like, oh, it's a video game. Yeah. Oh, it's an actual video game.
Yeah.
And music was one of those where it's a huge difference in terms of, okay, yeah, you can play this. The same for me, the VFX pass.
Yeah.
When you can heavy attack and Rin does this sort of backflip with a thing, and I was like, okay, this is a video game. I now get to absolutely beat the snot out of
those
guys.
moments are my favorite moments in dev. Just when you see something and you're just so happy and gleeful that something's in the game, and you just go, that's fantastic.
And you just giggle.
Now you talk about the game being inspired by Icelandic environments and being built on Icelandic environments. We posted another video about how we have used photogrammetry to scan a mountain, a glacier, to bring into our game. But what's the process to getting there?
I kind of want to hijack your question and answer it with two answers.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So the first is, like, when we talk about the game being inspired by Iceland, I would say that is extremely true, but at the same time not, because it's not like we're going into an era or a time in Iceland in the past that we've kind of looked at and go, we want to do this. We're creating a whole new fantasy world with this game. So for me, it's more like how New Zealand played a huge role in Lord of the Rings, like a big role. And it's certainly, like, for all of us who watch those movies, it's integral to how the world looks in Lord of the Rings. But certainly it's not where Lord of the Rings takes place. And I'd say similar for us. In terms of how we made it, it was a long process to get things working. For those who are tech savvy, we were starting to work on this before there were even, scanned libraries really kind of broadly available. So we were starting to just kind of go outside of the office and experimenting with this new technology. And this is at the time when we were working on Unreal Engine 4, which is also a bit more limited in the utilization of that than Unreal Engine 5. We started trying to scan people for the game. It was all pretty rough to start with, but you got to start somewhere. And then, we just kept going at it, and we kind of realized we could do so much with this technology if we just kept pushing and kept iterating. And that's how we kind of evolved from, rough basic scans with a phone camera that weren't that great to like, okay, now we scanned a glacier for the game.
So there's a few steps in between there.
There's a few steps in between there, but it's like, it took a while to kind of get to that point, to really understand how you have to adapt, the scans for the game engines, because you can't just really scan and like plop it in, or well, you can, but you have to kind of think about, how you're going to set up the materials, what the density you're going to have used, and then we have to do a lot of tweaking in terms of adding all the missing masks, of roughness masks, and different information that the game engine needs to really render those elements well. And then, of course, just dealing with the raw scale of an asset like that, like we scanned the whole mountain into the game, an Icelandic mountain, and just kind of dealing with how that holds up in game is a problem. I mean, the glacier, I think we were 6 months struggling with tech since we scanned until we got it in, just as an example.
Yeah, it was constantly going back and forth. There was a bit where we scanned Kirkjufell mountain, and there was a bit where in the game it was already there, but it was a model, like it was sculpted.
Yeah, because we hadn't had the scan yet.
Yeah, so it took ages until that got finished, just because it's tech stuff. It's literally like trying to figure out how the technology works. And Halldór's talking about iteration. I don't know how often we got Aldís in to scan her, because we did it very early on, and we were like, there, done. And then we do it again and again, repeatedly. And every time we did it, it was way better.
I just want to jump on that point quickly and say, like, that's a big reason of why we wanted to do these things internally, is because we wanted to build in the know-how, the tech, because we needed to adapt all these weapons for a 40-person team, and then we wanted to keep the knowledge going into next games and not rely too much on services outside of Iceland that would be tough to reach and stuff like that. So this was really, like, this built-in knowledge is, I think, is going to serve us really well, and has allowed more flexibility, with the mocap that we built, way more flexibility, because we need to record tens of thousands of animations.
Yeah, and same with that when you're talking about like 10 years ago. So much of that is just about learning what we're doing. And I know you phrased it once as when we were getting started on like proper production, you were like, okay, now we've done our master's degree in this. Yeah. We've done enough years to be a master, like in education on this subject. So let's go put it to use. Yeah. And that's sometimes what it felt like. First time, I think it was my first or second week in office. I'd never opened Unreal before.
Because you came from film.
I came from film, and I was familiar with editing software and VFX software. And then somebody suggested, can we get this new film guy to look at the Unreal sequencer? Nobody could tell me how it worked, and if you go Google Unreal sequencer tutorials, there's not a lot of them. It was kind of a fascinating thing of just clicking buttons, like a kid learning how a computer works and seeing,
how things map from the real camera to the gaming camera.
Yeah. And they've got settings for lenses. I know how lenses work, right? Yeah. And they've got settings for shutter speed. I know how shutter speeds work. And
I mean, you talked about bringing Aldís in multiple times, doing different scans. I remember some of those times, early times we brought her in, we stood her on a cheese platter.
Yes.
And we spun her in circles.
Yeah, there was a garden hose around the outside of the cheese platter and a little fishing rope or whatever in there. And somebody had to be like pulling the rope on the floor smoothly, and she's sort of balancing on there.
So I need to give context. For this. So we had recently, this is at the time where we were figuring out how to scan humans, and full humans, not just faces, for the game. And we had a very limited range of cameras to use. So we really only could cover about 45 degrees, which is not enough to scan a person. Like if we just ask her to turn herself, every slight movement will confuse the cameras. So what we needed to do was to make a backdrop behind her that was completely uniform. Imagine just a white, infinite, like in the Matrix, just infinite thing. We thought, okay, well, if she stands perfectly still, we could just turn her. And then we thought, how can we turn her? So we went to the hardware store and we were like, do you have things that we could use to turn something? I don't think they were thinking in person, but they were like, we have this cheese platter. And we were like, fantastic, let's go. And so they were like, but obviously we can't lay there and turn because then our hand will be on camera. So, and the other thing was like, if she stood on it, it would lean. So we had to first reinforce it with a bunch of screws. It broke anyway though, spoilers. But then we had to turn it. So we were like, okay, we need a piece of string. But of course, if you just tie a piece of string around a piece of wood, it's gonna fall off. So we took a garden hose and we wrapped it around the edge of the cheese platter, and we then cut the outer ring of it so you had access for rope to go in and you could turn around it, and we just bolted that hose into it. And then we took that string that I was talking about, wrapped in a bunch of circles, and then we lay out a frame, pulling and rotating Aldis. And I am thankful that she did not just quit.
She could have. It was right there. And the scan?
It did work. Yeah, it did work.
And this is to solve that problem where if you're trying to get like publishers to be interested in a game like this, you kind of have to have a game like this.
Yeah, that's the issue.
How do you get there? Well, it turns out you get a cheese platter, some rope, and like whatever else you can find, and literally, like if you're trying to get into game dev, you literally take any chance or any tech you can mess with, get your hands on it, and figure it out, because that is the only way you can get to a certain quality bar to be to have a thing that you can then present and then people want to see and want to hear about.
I think this is important to build on because we talk a lot about being a 40-person studio. We started way smaller.
Yeah.
With the cheese platter story, I think that's 10 people in an attic.
Something like that. Yeah.
So essentially, we could start smaller and build something to prove something.
Yeah.
And then build a small studio around that core of proof.
Yeah.
We kind of glossed over mocap earlier. Where did the decision point fall that outsourcing that sort of stuff wasn't an option?
So we knew, just based off the one-line description it gave of the game, that we're going to have a big story in the game. We're going to have a lot of combat and a lot of stuff in the game, and all that requires a bunch of animation. There was no way for us, for both the reason that the sheer amount of content that we needed for 15 hours of game story and 20 different enemies and so much combat and animations and platforming, that we just needed to be able to do it ourselves, but not only do it ourselves, but to be able to iterate like we've been talking about. Because we go and record one attack animation, we play with it for half a year and just let it sit. And then we go and, actually this could be better. And we go back and re-record something different. And that agility is really the key for being able to make things work with a 40-person team. So that's why we kind of went and knew that we had to get our own space. And also we're working with Icelandic cast. We need to be able to bring them on set. At least for us, we don't record the entire story, just over 20 days, on a summer. We actually keep recording it throughout the development process and iterate and react to the changes in levels and react to new mechanics and react to anything that's making the game through this process. So we really need that agility because games are iterative in nature.
And it's also like with the cast, they were often working, like Kalle at the time we were filming, Karla was playing Abram, was doing a theater production.
Yeah.
And Aldís was filming a TV show she had co-written. There's no way they can stop that. So what we had to do is sort of steal a day from them here and there, and they'd be like, oh, tomorrow they're only shooting actors that aren't me. And we're like, okay, let's go. Let's get you in the studio. Let's see if we can, get these scenes done. We might not get her for another couple of months. And we'd learn a bunch, we'd change some stuff, we'd figure out something new, and we're always
just have a list ready when she's back.
Yeah.
All right, we gotta shoot these 10 things.
Yeah. So we go, okay, can we steal 5 days over the course of the next month or something, which is very different to how you do it on film, where everyone just
commits to
3 weeks of nothing but the thing, or 9 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever it is.
It would have been very different for us to have to fly everyone out and book a week.
Yeah, it would have been possible. We do have actors who are not based in Iceland in the game as well. But it certainly adds to when you have someone who has just so much content in the game, it becomes more tough for the main cast.
I want to kind of end this by maybe asking each of you individually, do you have a favorite memory, a favorite moment that you remember through the development process?
There's a moment in the story that I really shouldn't talk too much about, but it was a difficult scene to film. Because a lot of this video game stuff, it's tech heavy, and there are all these things where you have to be concerned, because when they're doing mocap, they've got these cameras on their face. And I was really anxious. There was a lot of, people were close to each other, and they were having to do very emotional acting. We had to do it in such a way that we could film their faces, but then we also had to get the raw performance. So we were able to do a pass with a camera and then take them off, put the mic on the suit, and do it again just...
So that's how I did it. I always wondered, actually.
Yeah. And we were just sitting there. We were all in one corner of the mocap studio because it had to start with her running, and the studio is only a certain length. So every time Rin is running, she has to cross the entire studio if it's in a cinematic. So we were all in one corner, and we were doing this really dramatic scene, and it was fascinating how much we were able to get close to the the sort of emotional heart of this stuff,
Yeah.
despite the fact that whenever something breaks, we have to go put on, we have to go troubleshoot the devices the actors are wearing or whatever it is. So I think that's going to stick with me a while.
I don't know. I think my favorite moment, honestly, was the alpha.
Yeah.
Because then we had the game together, and I kind of had a calmer feeling of, okay, from now it's iteration. Like this is a good base. So it felt good. It felt that the team could see the game wholly for the first time, which is a big, like, magical moment for me. So I think it's the alpha.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for now. We've got a lot more details coming in the, coming weeks. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in EMA.
Echoes of the End. Wishlist now.